Okay, I think we can start. Welcome everybody to our webinar. We're very pleased to be with you today. Our topic for today is how brands can succeed on Snapchat and how brands can navigate native branded content to yield great results for their brand marketing. I'm very pleased to be here today with Rana and Rana, two members of the U-Turn team, core members. Rana and Rana have been with U-Turn for over 2 years now, and they both come from a background in media and communications, and they both have a passion for new media, entertainment, and acting. Today we'll be discussing, deep diving into how you can leverage Snapchat for your brand and how to reach audiences and deliver the right messages. A little bit about us before we get into the webinar. Some of you may know a little bit about Webedia Arabia, but let me take the time to walk you through us. Some of you know U-Turn and some of you know Diwani. In fact, Webedia is the joining of forces of these two companies. We are one of the region's largest digital networks, where we reach about 50 million Arab users. And we are part of a bigger Webedia group internationally, with over 50 sites and applications reaching 250 million people. Our motto is, we engage Arab audiences with passion, and we truly do. We do that through 5 main verticals, namely pop culture. This is where you'll find U-Turn and the U-Turn team. Fashion and beauty through our platform yasmina.com. Parenting through our platform Ailati, the #1 advice destination for mothers in the GCC. Food through Atab Tabkha, a leading food destination in the region. And finally, and most recently, esports through Millennium Gaming and very newly SaudiGamer.com, a leading Saudi esports platform. Our cross-vertical model gives us a very unique competitive advantage in the way that we offer brand solutions. We can offer brand solutions uniquely, especially in content creation, content distribution, influencer management, data management, and more. Today, since we'll be talking about U-Turn, I'd like to just give you a little bit about background about U-Turn. So a lot of you may know, U-Turn is a pioneer in Saudi digital content creation, a very unique channel of its kind, and its Snapchat channel in particular is a success story for us and a source of pride, home to over 2 million subscribers and followers, 70% of which are from Saudi Arabia. And interestingly enough, 52% of them are aged 21 to 34, making it a very sweet spot to reach Saudi millennials. In fact, the U-Turn team is millennials talking to millennials, and the topics covered range lots of trendy and interesting relevant content, and our stories average around 8 million views. Ladies, I'm very happy to have you with us. Hi.
Hi, Dyala. Great to be here.
Great to have you. Let's get into the basics a little bit. I'd like to take this second to have a poll for our audiences just before we kick off. We want to know if you've ever tried Snapchat for your brand marketing. So if you could just take a quick vote here so we can see the results. And after that, we'll kick off. So let's take a look at the results. I can see that the majority has tried Snap, and quite a 30% of you haven't. So this should be a very interesting conversation for you. Today, the interesting part of our conversation will be about the sweet spot between using Snapchat as a channel and also tapping into very hyper-local native branded content. And that's where the U-Turn team can really give us their insights. To start with the basics, we know often we're approached by brands, by brand managers, brand marketers, that they want to reach Saudi millennials, and they want to talk to them and engage them and sort of keep them connected to the brand. But this is no easy feat. And I think that it's essential for us to be walked through your process on how you come up with your interesting content, how you reach these audiences, and what goes into your thinking. So ladies, the floor is yours. If you could walk us through it.
Yeah, so as you mentioned before, we are the U-Turn channel. When we established it, we were aiming to create content from youth to youth. So whenever we create content for our normal stories or branded content, we always try to put ourselves in the audience's shoes and understand their point of view, so we can create content like tailored for them. Our biggest challenge when we wanted to create branded content was, how do we create content that won't make the users feel the urge to skip? Because, you know, it's like a human reflex. When you get an ad, you skip it. So this was our biggest challenge.
Basically, when we collaborate with a brand, we take a look at their unique selling points that they want us to focus on and market. And we think of the situation, or we think of ways that we can connect the audience to the product. So we create a problem that the audience can relate to, and that can lead to introducing the product.
Yeah, and in that way you find that the brand fits into the user's life in a way that sounds relatable and relevant. So on that note, what's your process like? What do you keep in mind when you're thinking about it? What are some techniques that you use?
Yeah, so as you know, the market is super competitive. Especially when it's like a season like Ramadan, for example, or something like that. Everyone is creating content around the same thing. So we've established some office rules that we use whenever we're brainstorming. So it helps us to stand out. One of these rules are, we never go with our first idea, for example, because it's usually the mainstream one. If we're a small team, so if two people come up with the same idea, we drop that idea because probably it's a very common one. We learn a lot from our data to help us understand our audience better and create tailored content for them. And also, whenever we think of content, we don't want to just purely entertain. We try to also add some educational elements in it.
Yeah, that makes sense. If I could ask you a little bit about what you think about, or what you keep in mind when you're trying to craft the messages or the tone of voice. What are some things you need to remind yourself of when you're working on a content campaign or a content idea?
We always have to remind ourselves that we're not only trying to sell a product, but we're also telling a story. We always have to stay loyal to our audience in terms of our tone of voice. And we also help the client understand the audience and how they consume content. That way we can create ads that are seamless and don't feel forced. People can enjoy the ads.
Yeah, I think that's the real sweet spot in branded content, is that it's in the storytelling that we retain the user, and it's in the storytelling that we sort of enforce the brand idea, enforce the brand values. I think that I'd like to ask you a little bit about what you think is sort of best practices for branded content in general.
I think one of the best things that makes our content work and has our audience interact with it is that we try to be as real as we can. Whether it's the way we look or the way we speak or the way we act, these things we try to stay real. We try to stay natural, because in the end of the day, like, people, when they're at home with their family and with their friends, they're their true self with their best and their worst qualities. And that's what people really want to see. People want to see something they can relate to.
Absolutely.
And I think that's our biggest factor, which is the relatability. And since the people can relate to us, they can trust the content.
Yeah.
And also, relatability, I agree 100%, is the main factor to our success, but also the reading our data and understanding the audience's behavior was a very important factor to create better content for them.
Yeah, really understanding your insights and then channeling that into content that makes sense with your audience.
Exactly.
What would you, if I were to ask you to recommend sort of top level recommendations for brands on Snapchat in general? So what are some key ideas you could give advice or insights to brands?
So as I just mentioned, like, usually when you're watching stories and an ad pops up, you automatically just skip it. So I think over branding in general, when people realize this is an ad, they automatically skip it. So what we suggest always to have it as native and as part of a content, a piece of entertainment as much as possible, and not treat it as an ad that sticks out. We want it to be very seamless within content, like treat the ad as a piece of entertainment.
Yeah. Rana, is there anything you wanna add?
No, I'm good. Thanks.
I think I would like to just point out that you can ask any questions in the Q&A tool, and we'll be able to answer that towards the end. So if you have any questions on how we engage or what kind of recommendations we have, please feel free to add them. So now that we've kind of gone through that in your process, you know, when we work on traditional ad campaigns, we know how to execute from A to Z. We get the brief and we can see how that's applied. But with branded content, and especially on Snapchat, I think a lot of people don't really understand how it's executed, how it's applied, what are the different ways that we can approach branded content. So can you explain the difference to us? Can you explain to us how brands can practically create this content on Snapchat? I know there's ads and there's takeovers, so if you can just walk us through each different kind for the audience.
Okay, so when a client approaches us, we have two main offerings, a takeover or a standalone ad. Rana will dive deeper into the takeovers, but the standalone ads are just the ads that run within our stories or on Snapchat in general. What's cool about them that you can have a very specific targeted audience. So for example, if a client comes to us and they only want to target women under the age of 30 that are interested in sports, we can do it that specific, you know, and we can create the content come in like that. What keeps it very unique, the standalone ads, are that we create them as a piece of content. We don't make them just that ad that sticks out. We create them as a piece of content that makes the people like hooked and want to watch the story as a storytelling.
So then we have our takeovers. Basically, our takeovers, when a brand is on board, the brand takes over the entire story. So, but we're not so direct in it. But what we do is we make the topic of the story the purpose of the product. So what we do is we create situations or problems that bring awareness of a certain topic, and then when the ads come in, that's when you can introduce the ads, but it comes in like as part of a story. So our stories usually consist of video content and interactive content. And what I say by interactive content is like games, puzzles, poll, like things that they can vote on, they can share their opinions, things like that. So that it's not just something that they're being entertained by, but something that they're interacting with. And basically what we do is when we have a brand on board, we tailor our story to fit their brief in terms of what type of content from ours works with them and in our own tone of voice. But we always have to keep in mind that we don't want to be direct. We don't want to put the brand in their faces. So we try to just highlight a situation or highlight an issue that can introduce the product in the ad. That way the ad comes in seamlessly and it still holds a sense of humor. And so because it still holds that sense of humor and feels like it's part of the story, it doesn't feel forced. People are enjoying the ad, as I said before.
Absolutely. I think that's why takeovers can be so successful, because the user can really stay with you throughout the whole story and then can really understand the brand as a solution or as part of their life or an answer to their question. I think if we can now, we can maybe look at some of the cases you've done as takeovers, some sort of success stories or ways you've responded to briefs, ways you've responded to brand challenges. Shall we go next here? So we do like to kind of explain it as an ad immersed in a story. Rowan, I leave the floor to you if you want to go for some explanations here.
Yes, so this is a campaign for Kellogg's. It went live during Ramadan. They wanted to highlight their all brand product, and they wanted to encourage people to have it for suhoor. as it's very healthy, keeps you full the whole day, and it's also very delicious. Here was a challenge for us because as you know, us like having suhoor, it's not like the normal traditional suhoor, like eggs, beans and stuff, you know. So here we wanted to highlight how you can change this and how it would affect you throughout the day while fasting. So here in the first ad, we showed the difference between the person who would have all bran for suhoor and the people who won't, how they'll feel uncomfortable throughout the day, bloated, like that, and the other person who had all bran is feeling fine.
Shall we take a look at the video?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
بنات السحور عندي اليوم طيب؟ أنا أصلاً جاي وجنازين. أهلاً. أهلاً. جوك. طيب خلي تخبطني عورني ما أقدر. قلت لكم كل all براين.
So that's the setup.
Yes. For the second ad, we faked like a girls gathering during Ramadan, and they're at a friend's house because they only like her food, but they don't like her personally, you know. So we faked a gathering, and one of them, like, she had enough of her, so she went to her kitchen. She bribed her with money. Please tell me your secret. And obviously, the secret for her yummy food was all bran.
Okay, I'm gonna play that then. I'll play the scenario at the beginning where they're faking friendship.
بنات ايش جابنا هنا؟ اصبر بنات اكلها مرة حلو. تفضلوا بنات ام علي. يعطيك كيف تسويها؟ لكم ليه؟
And each video is how long?
10 seconds.
خليها ألف. مرة خفيفة.
That's great. Okay, I think the next slide as well is a continuation of Kellogg. Yep.
Yes.
So what's happening here?
Here, we wanted to highlight the person who's working out and how you can never find the right time during Ramadan to work out. Is it before futur? Is it after futur? I'm feeling full. I don't have the energy before. So there's always that one person suffering at the gym, and the other person is just like looking at him, making fun of him. And then in the ad, the solution was, no, he's finally fit. What happened? What changed? What's the secret? And the secret was all bran. So the first video is whoever trains after futur. The second one is before, when he doesn't have any energy, and the third one is the ad.
All right, let's see. Video 1. And video 2. And finally the ad.
كيف صرت رياضي مش فجأة؟ والله شوف أوبرا ساعدك على الصيام ونشطك ساعدك على الحركة كويس
It's also credit to the fact that the audience knows and recognizes you so much that they stay with you in all your different scenarios and skits, which is a big asset, I think. Next up is another campaign that you've worked on. I believe it's Deezer.
Yes, Deezer.
Rana, you're going to take us through this?
Yeah. Basically, Deezer is a music app. And when Deezer approached us, they had 3 main objectives that they wanted us to highlight in our story. So I'm going to talk about each point and elaborate on how we executed it. Basically, the first point was that you could play music offline, which means if you don't have internet, you can still enjoy your music with Deezer. Here we had a group of friends going on a road trip, but then they got lost, which means they had no network. They couldn't contact anyone. They couldn't navigate anymore. And so the guy is freaking out. But then the other one is chilling in the car, not helping and enjoying his music. And then that's when the ad comes in, where he asks him, "What are you doing? How are you even playing music? There's no network here." And Deezer, play offline.
Deezer is the answer.
Let's take a look.
Check it out.
حبيبي عندي ديزر شغل اغاني وحملت
Yeah, then we have the second point, which was the flow feature, which suggests similar music to the ones you've already chosen. So here we had a couple, like they're on the phone getting to know each other. And when the girl talks about her favorite song, he uses the flow feature to get more music that's in her style so that he can charm her. That's followed by the ad where basically he confesses to her that, by the way, I charmed you with all this music. I used Deezer flow and all these things. So let's take a look.
اسمع هذه الأغنية.
ترسلي أغنية ثانية بعد.
أوكي.
أوه هذا جوك الأغاني. طب اسمعي هذه وهذه وهذه.
ما صدق جوك زي في الأغاني.
وش تحسبين؟ أنا بغير حياتك.
And this is ad number 3.
ما أصدق مرسنا على زواجنا.
تدري لألا ذوقك في الأغاني ما كان أعطيتك وجه.
هذا ديزر. كنت أسوي لايك للأغاني اللي ترسلينها وفلو يطلع لي الأغاني تشبهها ورجع أرسلها لك.
She was.
Okay, and then finally the third point, which was that Deezer has a variety of playlists. We went about this by having a challenge between two people where they have to guess the song. That followed the ad. That was followed by the ad where they tell people they can play the same game using Deezer app because they have a variety of playlists. I just want to mention that the video shown here is just the top snap, but there was a swipe up for a long form video of the actual challenge. But let's take a look.
All right.
تبي تشوفه؟
لا لا تكلمهم لا تكلمني انا. لو ودكم تشوفون تحدي الاغاني اللي صار بيني وبين حاتم
ارفع عشان.
So this is the right before the swipe up. So this is the call to
This is before the swipe up, yeah.
Okay.
نقول لهم
يلا قول لو ودكم تسوون نفس التحدي اللي صار بيني وبين حاتم استخدموا برنامج ديزر.
استخدموا البلاي ليست تحدوا بعض يشاركون التحدي.
Okay, and let's go through a little bit of the success metrics of this campaign. I know that we did see quite a few conversions. Can you walk us through these numbers, please, and in general the campaign?
Yeah, the Deezer takeover was a very successful campaign for both us and the client. As you can see, the total and unique viewers were almost more than double our average. We've noticed also very high engagement. So 220,000 screenshots and shares is a really good number. And also the attachment conversion was at 25%. From Deezer's perspective, they were new to the region. They just came to the MENA region, and this campaign helped to gain a lot of recognition and help them expand their reach. And they've informed us that they've also had high numbers of downloads after this campaign.
So actually the campaign ended up benefiting both the brand and the channel in so many ways. So increasing your views and your standing, and also benefiting the brand in real and measurable ROI. I just want to take a second to remind everybody if they have any questions to add them into the Q&A feature, and I've already seen some, and I will answer in just a few. Up next, I think we'd like to take a small poll now that we've done all this. We've walked you through our process and what native content really feels like for us. We want to ask you, would you consider native branded content for your brand? So let's take a look at this poll and your answers. All right, let's see some results. Wow, that's a 95% of you would consider it, which is awesome to hear. We really feel that this kind of sweet spot of content is so effective, so efficient for audience retention, for awareness, for really engaging with audiences. So we're very happy to hear that. And on that note, I think it's a good idea to explain how we measure success, or what we would consider a successful campaign, or what are success metrics like. So let's jump into that a little bit. Let's see what we look out for when we're thinking about success. So Rowan, can you walk us through this?
Yes, so we measure success through multiple factors. They're on the screen. One of the very important ones is the completion rate. So to us, it's very important because that means they're not skipping through our story. They're actually watching, completing the story. They're enjoying it. Also shares. Shares is very important because it means they've watched it, related to it, and they shared it with like a friend or a family member that would relate to it as well. So that means that we finally understood their content, the type of understand our audience, the type of content they'd like to see, and they're sharing it. And naturally, sharing content leads us to more views, and that's probably why we're averaging at 6 to 8 million per story.
I think engagement and completion rate are both indicative of how much the audience is staying with your story. And views can be an indicator of awareness. So I think that's very clear. I would think it's about time to wrap up and get into our questions. So I had seen here some questions. So we have a question from Muhammad Edsufi asking, what kind of data can Snapchat provide and how does it help maneuver our marketing? So I will let the girls answer a little bit more, but essentially Snapchat can give you a lot of insights, and their built-in back-end tool can give you a lot of information about audiences, about how your content is being watched, how your content is being consumed. Ladies, if you'd like to add, please go ahead.
It's basically the multiple factors that we see as success to us are things that Snapchat has shared with us and that helped us understand our audience. So for example, when this piece of content is getting multiple shares, okay, so maybe this topic or this type of content or this type of visual is more appealing to them. So this is how we try to identify what they like most, and from most of these factors.
Okay, I have a question from Basim, and he's saying, thanks for the interesting session, thank you. Regarding the takeover, is there a way where we can identify the most trending stories and topics, as well as the Snapchat accounts that are focused on those topics? So I think the question is to try to have, so basically to be relevant to what's trending on Snapchat. And if that's the case, again, I leave the floor to the girls to answer that.
A very insightful information Snapchat offers is about our audience. So like every month, for example, we do like a statistic kind of thing to know what our audience, like our subscribers, are interested in, and they can tell you how they're like consuming content on the channel, on the app, basically. So if they're watching a lot of food stuff or a lot of fitness and wellness, for example, so we know that these type of content would work because this is what they're consuming on the app in general.
Thank you. Okay, I have a question from Anonymous, and the question is, hello, what's the difference between the completion rate and the time spent? Rana.
Okay. Basically, the completion rate tells us if the user has watched the entire snap or skipped it and went to the next one. But the time spent tells us how much time you spent on the snap, which means this is going to tell us if you completed the snap and rewatched it. So the time spent might even be longer than the actual snap.
Okay, that's clear. Thank you. I have a question from Samir Khalil. What are the timelines required between briefing and execution? So that's a question that has a variable answer. It really depends on the scope of the brief and the execution required. Sometimes things can be shot faster. Sometimes things need more editing, depending on how we're answering the brief. Also depending on how much engagement we're creating in between. So yeah, it depends on the brief. I have a question from Rizet. Thank you for your great session and presentation. Thank you. Question: what type of data and insights can be shared to help brands define their content strategy on the platform? Do you recommend the platform to drive sales? So I'll start with your second question. We do know that Snapchat has, of all the platforms, one of the highest conversion rates and a very high CTA drive. So yes, I do recommend it to drive sales. And I think we can see from the cases we saw today with Deezer, just how much it affected their downloads. And that's just living proof. What type of data and insights can be shared to help brands define their content strategy? Girls, you were talking earlier in the webinar about how you use data to generate, to create content for you. So what kind of data do you look for when you're crafting your content? And then when you go to the brand and you say, listen, we know our audience does this or watches this or likes this. So can you walk us through that a bit?
So it mainly depends on the brief. So when we get the brief, we try to, from our understanding from the data, for example, we know that this category works best, or this category can work really well with this specific topic or something like that. So we go back to them with a proposal that we're proposing whatever categories or whatever, based on our insights, whatever piece of content that would work, but it needs to be like specific to the brand as well, because not everything can work with everything, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because you have to target your content according to the right data, to the right insights.
Exactly.
Do we have any more questions that you want to ask us? Please go ahead, type them in the Q&A, and we are here to answer your questions. If you have any other questions, feel free to email us as well. Thank you. I have a question. My question is, what is the difference between completion rate and average playtime metric? I definitely cannot answer that. I will check with the girls if they can, and if they can't, we will get back to you with a detailed answer. Can you guys share that information?
I'm not sure what's a playtime metric, what he means by it.
Yeah, I'm not clear either. Maybe I think he's referring to watch time.
So the time spent? Perhaps,
yes. In any case, we will look into that and we will get back to you at a different time. Thank you for your question. I have a question. Is Snapchat powerful in all GCC, or is there some countries where people interact less with Snapchat than with Instagram or Facebook? So Snapchat is one of the leading platforms in the GCC, including Saudi Arabia primarily, and as well as the Kuwait, Emirates, and other countries. Is there some countries where people interact less with Snapchat than with Instagram or Facebook? We do know that in the GCC, audiences are less present on Facebook and actually more present on younger platforms like Snapchat and TikTok very recently, and yes, Instagram to a certain extent. I believe the girls are aligned on this. Do you want to add anything to that?
No, I second what you just said. Yes, agree.
Okay, that's done here. I have a question from Muhammad. Thank you for the interactive session. My question is how to develop content in Snapchat. So your question had very different ways to answer that. So if you're asking for your brand, you can create your own channel. Please correct me if I'm wrong, Rowan and Rana. Or are you asking to develop content with U-Turn, in which case drop us a line and we'll be happy to explore that with you. Can you elaborate a little bit, girls, about that? How to develop content for a brand? Like, would they set up a channel, or what would you recommend?
Probably what Snapchat has been pushing for these days are shows. So show is a really good idea nowadays because they're really pushing for it. And publisher channels as well, but I'm not sure how to get on that now.
Yeah. I do have a question. Okay, so I have a very interesting one. How has coronavirus affected ad spend, to the better or the worse? That's a very interesting question, and I think it's a question to be asked to the brand managers that are attending this webinar. So we'd be very curious to hear from you regarding how your spending has changed for your brand during this period. We do know that some brands are investing more, including verticals like food, e-commerce, entertainment, and we also know that some brands have been a little bit hesitant to spend. So by all means, I'd like to hear from the brand managers. I have another question here. I'm curious about the age group users of Snapchat. Okay, so in our case, on the U-Turn channel, our audiences are 52% are between the ages of 21 and 34, and then right behind that, they're from 16 to 21. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
But if you guys want to add anything, Rowan or Rana, about generally Snapchat's group users, go ahead.
I think the majority of them is between the age of 18 to 34.
I'd just like to follow up that if there's any questions regarding metrics or any details you want to understand about watch time, about Snap tools, we do have a dedicated data team that can get back to you. So feel free to reach out to the Webedia team and we can provide you with support. Again, I'd like to ask if you have any questions, please submit them to the Q&A. And if there's anything you feel that wasn't answered, ping us again and we'll do our best to get back to you. I'm gonna leave the floor open for your questions. Okay, it appears you are all out of questions. So I think it might be, how does the Snapchat algorithm work? So I would prefer to leave this question as well to our dedicated data team that can get back to you. But if the girls have anything to add, please feel free. Rana or Rana.
What I know is, for example, when you're watching something like, let's say a famous cook, a chef on Snapchat, and you're spending time on that specific account a lot, Snapchat will start recommending things for you based on that. So it depends mainly on what you're watching, that Snapchat would recommend what to watch more from this category.
Okay, I think thank you, Rowan. I think we're done for today. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank everybody who's joined our webinar. It's been very interesting to discuss this with Rowan and Rana. We're very happy to take all your questions and more. Please feel free to reach out to us and our email addresses. And we're happy to answer any further questions offline in another format. Rowan and Rana, thank you so much for your dedication and your creativity. And I guess we'll leave you all today.
Thank you. Bye. Stay safe and positive.
Thank you.
Bye. Stay safe.